Welcome to Explosive True Crime Stories, where we bring you the most shocking true crime stories and events. Kindly support us by subscribing to this channel. Hit the notification bell icon so you won't miss our latest videos. Texas, a state that prides itself on justice, tradition, and honor. At its center stood Judge William Harrington, a man revered for his unyielding pursuit of fairness and his commanding presence in the courtroom. For decades, his rulings shaped lives, his decisions were etched into law, and his reputation towered over a small, tight-knit community. But behind the judge's robes and gavel lay a life no one saw coming. In 2023, a quiet night in suburban Texas erupted into chaos when emergency responders entered a seemingly ordinary home. Inside, the scene was anything but ordinary. A young girl, barely out of her teenage years, lay lifeless, her future stolen in an instant. Nearby, another body was discovered, unrecognizable at first glance. It was a crime scene so chilling, so unnerving, that it would leave both investigators and the public searching for answers for months. The connections seemed implausible at first. This wasn't a house of strangers, nor a random act of violence. An emblem of justice in the community was suddenly at the center of a storm no one could have predicted. His name appeared in notes, on phones, and whispers among those who knew too much. What could connect a powerful man to a vulnerable young girl? And what chain of events led to this deadly encounter? And what chain of events led to this monstrous murder in the first place? It was perfectly built for this. It seemed a divine intervention. He looked around the room. And what chain of events led to this deadly encounter? This case wasn't just about betrayal or scandal. It was about power, control, and the devastating cost of secrets. 2 lives ended in one night, and the truth, shrouded in a labyrinth of lies, would take months to unravel. How does a man entrusted with the scales of justice tip them so violently in his favor? And what role did this young girl play in the unraveling of a life that seemed untouchable? Today, we uncover a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, power, and the human condition. In Brighton, Texas, Judge William Harrington wasn't just respected, he was revered. A towering figure in the courtroom and a constant presence at community events. His reputation painted a picture of moral clarity and unshakable integrity. His name alone was enough to command respect. Those who appeared before him, whether as defendants, attorneys, or witnesses, knew they were in the hands of a man who embodied justice. To the outside world, Judge Harrington was untouchable. A husband of 25 years, a father of 2 grown children, and an active churchgoer, his life seemed as solid as the courtroom he presided over. His peers admired him, his community celebrated him, and his family depended on him. But beneath the accolades and applause was a man no one truly knew. Emily Carson, on the other hand, was just beginning to find her place in the world. At 19, she had dreams that stretched beyond Brighton. Bright and ambitious, Emily wanted to escape the confines of small-town life. She had plans to study psychology, to travel, to make a difference. Life had not been easy for her. Raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to provide for her, Emily carried the weight of responsibility far beyond her years. She was a beacon of hope for her family, but struggled with insecurities she rarely voiced. Emily first crossed paths with Judge Harrington in what appeared to be a chance encounter. A dispute between neighbors had brought her into his courtroom as a key witness. Her composure, intelligence, and eloquence stood out to everyone in attendance, but most of all to the judge. In a rare moment of personal engagement, Harrington complimented her poise after the hearing, offering a few words of encouragement. Harrington exasperated. He offered a couple of brief encouragement. For most, this would have been a passing moment, but for Emily, those words mattered. And for the judge, this brief interaction seemed to plant a seed. Weeks later, they met again, this time at a charity event for underprivileged youth, where Emily was volunteering and Harrington was a keynote speaker. It was here that their relationship began to take shape. The relationship, at first glance, seemed innocent. Harrington expressed interest in helping Emily navigate her future, offering advice, opening doors to opportunities, and even introducing her to influential figures in the community. For a young woman seeking guidance, it seemed like a stroke of luck. For the judge, it was something entirely different. Phone records would later reveal that the relationship quickly escalated. What started as sporadic texts soon became nightly conversations. Messages that began with career advice shifted to something more personal. Questions about her life, her thoughts, her fears. Emily, flattered and perhaps overwhelmed by the attention, reciprocated. But it didn't take long for those closest to her to notice the changes. Emily's best friend Sarah would later recount how Emily grew increasingly withdrawn. She stopped attending group outings, skipped classes at the local college, and began making vague excuses about where she spent her time. When pressed, Emily would brush it off, saying she was busy or just tired. Her mother, meanwhile, was thrilled. She believed Judge Harrington was taking a genuine interest in her daughter's future, providing the kind of support Emily had lacked for most of her life. "He's a good man," she'd tell her coworkers. "He just wants to help her succeed." But others weren't so sure. Rumors began to circulate. Harrington's sudden presence at local events where Emily volunteered didn't go unnoticed. Neither did the subtle but telling glances exchanged between them. By the time Emily confided in Sarah about the nature of their relationship, it was already too late. "It's not what you think," Emily reportedly told her friend. But even as she tried to downplay it, her voice betrayed her unease. Sarah urged her to end it. But Emily was caught in a web of promises, fear, and something she couldn't fully explain. In the months leading up to the double homicide, Emily began to keep a journal, a habit she'd started years earlier but abandoned until now. The entries were cryptic but revealing. In one, she wrote, "I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions, and I don't know which way is safe." In another, "He says he cares about me, but why does it feel like I'm losing control?" Emily's turmoil didn't go unnoticed by her professors or coworkers, but no one could have predicted the storm that was about to erupt, a storm that would end in bloodshed. And then on a quiet October night, everything changed. 2 lives were lost, and the secrets Emily tried so hard to protect became the key to unraveling the truth, it was a call unlike any other. At 8:02 p.m., a young woman's trembling voice broke through the silence at the Brighton Dispatch Center. The words were faint, fragmented. "Help me. He's..." The operator strained to hear her, but the connection was unstable. A loud crash echoed through the line, followed by muffled cries, and then abruptly the call ended. It lasted just 23 seconds. The dispatcher tried to call back, but there was no answer. Without a clear address, officers were left to scour the vicinity based on the cell tower's signal. Minutes ticked by, each one critical. By the time they reached the source, it was too late. The home they arrived at was eerily quiet, the front door unlocked. Officers stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they found would haunt them forever. The living room was the first room they entered. Emily Carson, just 19 years old, was found lying face down near a shattered coffee table. Her injuries suggested a violent struggle. Defensive wounds on her arms told the story of someone who had fought desperately to survive. Nearby, a blood-stained letter lay partially obscured by glass shards. Investigators would later discover that it was written in Emily's handwriting, a message addressed to someone she called W. Its contents were brief but revealing. "You said you'd protect me. I believed you. Now I don't know if I can." In the kitchen, the second victim was found. A man, later identified as Matthew Langston, was slumped against the cabinets. The scene suggested he had been attacked from behind, the fatal blow delivered with a knife that investigators found just inches from his hand. Unlike Emily, Langston appeared to have been caught off guard, with no signs of a struggle. The letter, the knife, and the eerie silence of the house told the story. But it was a story full of gaps investigators were desperate to fill. Who had called 911? Was it Emily? If so, what had she seen in those final moments? And what about Langston? Why was a journalist, a man known for his investigations into corruption, found at the same scene? The answers began to emerge slowly, piece by piece. In Emily's car, parked just outside the house, investigators found a leather-bound journal tucked beneath the passenger seat. Its pages held months' worth of entries, raw, emotional, and deeply personal. And Emily wrote about her struggles with the relationship she had with Judge Harrington. What began as admiration had turned into something suffocating. She described feeling watched, controlled, and increasingly fearful of what might happen if she tried to distance herself. "He knows everything," one entry read. "It's like he's always one step ahead. I feel trapped." Another entry, dated just 2 days before her death, hinted at her meeting with Matthew Langston. He says he can help. I want to believe him, but what if he's wrong? What if this makes everything worse? Matthew Langston wasn't just a journalist. He was an investigator with a reputation for exposing corruption in powerful circles. His career was marked by bold, often controversial stories that uncovered truths many wished to keep hidden. In the months before the murders, Langston had been quietly collecting evidence against Judge Harrington. He had uncovered records of financial misconduct, cases where rulings appeared suspiciously biased, and, most damning of all, a string of interactions with young women, Emily among them. His notes, found in his office after his death, included interviews with former colleagues of Harrington, surveillance photographs, and a detailed timeline of Emily's interactions with the judge. Langston believed he was close to publishing a story that would dismantle Harrington's career, but he underestimated the risks. One chilling detail in Langston's notes stood out: a typed message he'd received from an anonymous sender just days before the murders. It read, "You're getting too close, drop it." Langston ignored the warning. Was his death a direct result of his investigation, or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Time was running out for everyone involved. Judge Harrington, a man known for his calculated demeanor, quickly became the prime suspect. His initial statements to police were calm, almost rehearsed. He claimed he hadn't seen Emily in weeks and had no idea why Langston would have been at that house, but the evidence told a different story. Surveillance footage placed Harrington's car near the crime scene at 7:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before the 9:11 call. Phone records showed repeated calls to Emily on the day of the murders, including one made just an hour before the attack. And then there was the knife. Forensic analysis confirmed that Harrington's fingerprints were on the handle, along with traces of Langston's blood. When confronted with this evidence, Harrington's calm exterior began to crack. His responses grew evasive, his demeanor shifting from confident to defensive. He refused to answer questions about his relationship with Emily, invoking his Fifth Amendment rights during questioning. As the investigation deepened, the judge's once unshakable reputation began to crumble, piece by piece. But the full truth of what happened that night was still out of reach, hidden behind a wall of lies, manipulation, and fear. Emily Carson was more than the victim of a crime. She was a person whose life was shaped by hope, resilience, and an unyielding belief in a better future. But for all her strength, Emily carried burdens few knew about. Burdens that ultimately brought her to the edge of a tragedy she couldn't escape. Born and raised in Brighton, Texas, Emily grew up in modest circumstances. Her father left when she was just a toddler, leaving her mother to raise her on her own. Emily's mother, Carol, worked long hours as a waitress and a part-time cleaner, doing everything she could to make ends meet. From a young age, Emily understood sacrifice, her mother's, and eventually her own. Emily excelled in school, always balancing her studies with part-time jobs to help ease the financial strain at home. She dreamed of becoming a psychologist, inspired by her own struggles with anxiety and self-doubt. "If I can help even one person feel less alone," she told her best friend Sarah, "then it's worth it." But even as she reached for her dreams, the weight of her reality was never far behind. In her journal, Emily often wrote about feeling like she had to be everything for everyone. She was the dutiful daughter, the reliable friend, and for a time, the quiet mentee of Judge Harrington. A relationship she initially believed was a lifeline, only to realize it was anything but. Carol Carson described her daughter as her whole world. Emily was the reason she worked 2 jobs, the reason she never gave up, even when times were tough. Carol had always believed that Emily was destined for greatness, a belief that made the loss all the more unbearable. In an emotional interview, Carol recounted the last conversation she had with her daughter. "She told me she was going to see a friend, that she wouldn't be gone long. I told her to be careful like I always did. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd see her." Carol's guilt is something she lives with every day. "I trusted him," she said, referring to Judge Harrington. "He made me believe he wanted to help her. I thought he was a good man. How could I have been so blind?" Matthew Langston was a man who lived for the truth. His colleagues described him as relentless, fearless, and sometimes reckless in his pursuit of justice. Over his 10-year career, he uncovered stories of corruption, fraud, and abuse that others were too afraid to touch. Langston's passion for journalism was rooted in his own childhood. Growing up in a troubled home, he often felt powerless against the injustices he witnessed. Journalism became his way of fighting back, a weapon against the powerful who exploited their positions. When Langston first heard whispers of Judge Harrington's misconduct, he saw an opportunity to expose a system that allowed such abuses to flourish. His investigation began quietly, with discreet interviews and late-night research. But as the months went on, the scope of what he uncovered grew larger and more dangerous. Langston's investigation wasn't just about Harrington's relationship with Emily. It extended to other cases, rulings that seemed suspicious, financial records that didn't add up, and testimonies from former clerks who hinted at a pattern of manipulation. But Langston's determination came at a cost. Friends noticed that he became increasingly paranoid in the weeks leading up to his death. He spoke of being followed, of receiving anonymous messages warning him to stop. One message in particular stood out. "You've gone too far. Walk away or you'll regret it." Langston didn't walk away. On the night of October 12, Langston told a colleague he was meeting a source who had critical information for his story. He didn't say who, he didn't say where. That was the last time anyone heard from him. To the people of Brighton, Judge William Harrington was a symbol of order and fairness. But the evidence against him told a different story. Surveillance footage placed Harrington's car near the crime scene less than 30 minutes before the 911 call. Phone records revealed a series of calls to Emily that grew increasingly frantic in the hours leading up to the murders, and the knife found at the scene had Harrington's fingerprints on the handle. Harrington denied everything. He claimed he hadn't seen Emily in weeks, that his phone had been hacked, and that the evidence was part of a coordinated effort to ruin his reputation. But as investigators dug deeper, more inconsistencies emerged. Witnesses came forward describing meetings between Harrington and Emily at odd hours. Financial records revealed payments to an anonymous account linked to a rental property, the very house where the murders took place. And then there was the letter, found beside Emily's body. Its words were haunting. "You said you'd protect me. I believed you. Now, I don't know what to believe." The courtroom was packed to capacity every single day of Judge William Harrington's trial. People lined up hours before the doors opened, desperate to witness the downfall of a man who had once been considered untouchable. Journalists from across the country descended on Brighton, their cameras capturing every moment as the trial unfolded. For many, this was more than a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning, a chance to finally answer the questions that had haunted the community since that fateful night. How had a man sworn to uphold justice betrayed it so completely? And what truly happened in that quiet suburban home where 2 lives were taken? The prosecution wasted no time building its case, laying out a devastating series of facts that painted a picture of premeditation and control. The jury heard testimony from forensic experts who detailed how Harrington's fingerprints were found on the knife used in the murders. DNA evidence from a jacket left at the scene tied him conclusively to the house. Surveillance footage from earlier that evening showed his car parked less than a block away. But it wasn't just physical evidence. The prosecution called former colleagues and staff members who testified about Harrington's behavior, his temper, his obsession with maintaining control, and his history of intimidating those who opposed him. One former clerk described an incident where Harrington allegedly threatened her career for questioning one of his rulings. "He always made sure you knew who had the power," she said. Then came the most damning piece of evidence, Emily Carson's journal. Page after page, her words painted a picture of a young woman desperate to escape a relationship she no longer trusted. The jury listened in stunned silence as the prosecutor read Emily's final entry aloud. "I hope this ends tonight." The defense faced an uphill battle from the start. Their strategy hinged on creating reasonable doubt. Harrington's lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial at best, pointing out gaps in the timeline and suggesting that the knife could have been planted. The defense called its own witnesses, including several character references who spoke of Harrington's years of public service and his unwavering dedication to justice. But their testimonies rang hollow against the overwhelming evidence. And during his testimony, one particularly tense moment came during Harrington's own testimony. Despite his lawyer's advice, he chose to take the stand, a decision that would ultimately backfire. Under cross-examination, the prosecution cornered him with a series of pointed questions about his relationship with Emily Carson. "You say she was like a daughter to you. the prosecutor said. Is that why you called her at midnight multiple times on the night of her death? Harrington's response was shaky, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. I was worried about her, he stammered. She needed guidance. The prosecutor pressed further. And is that why you rented a house under a false name to guide her? The courtroom fell silent, Harrington's inability to answer loud enough to echo in the minds of the jury. On the 43rd day of the trial, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on all counts. Harrington sat motionless as the words were read aloud, his face betraying no emotion. His family, seated behind him, wept quietly, while a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Outside, the reaction was explosive. Some celebrated, holding signs that read, "Justice for Emily and no one is above the law." Others expressed disbelief, clinging to the idea that Harrington had been wrongfully accused. For Emily's mother, the moment was bittersweet. This doesn't bring her back, she said tearfully to reporters, but it's a step toward healing. Even with Harrington behind bars, questions linger. What role, if any, did Matthew Langston's investigation play in his death? Was his presence at the house purely coincidental, or had he uncovered something too dangerous to ignore? And then there's Emily's final journal entry. Who was she writing about when she said, "I don't know what to believe anymore"? Was it Harrington, Langston, or someone else entirely? Investigators have since reopened parts of the case, looking into Harrington's financial records and communications in the months leading up to the murders. New witnesses have come forward, hinting at a larger network of individuals who may have been complicit in covering up his actions. The full truth, it seems, may still be out there, waiting to be uncovered. For the town of Brighton, the scars of this case will never fully heal. But in the wake of tragedy, there has been progress. Emily's friends and family founded the Carson Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young women in vulnerable situations. Matthew Langston's colleagues completed and published his investigation, ensuring his work lived on. His article, The Judge's Secret, received national acclaim, sparking conversations about abuse of power in the justice system. After the article's publication, this case reminds us of the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the resilience of those who fight for justice. Well, what do you think about this case? Were there pieces investigators missed? Could there still be more to uncover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the most complex true crime stories. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.